Today I will be discussing Amendment 10 of the Bill of Rights. I believe this is one of the most critical amendments of the Bill of Rights, equal to the First and the Second Amendments. The 10th Amendment states that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people. The amendment was created to address the concern of a strong federal government, a government that could replace the tyranny of the King of England, from which they had just fought so hard to gain their liberty from. Well, at first glance, the amendment seems very clear, stating that if it's not enumerated in the Constitution, if it's not stated in the Constitution, then those rights keep with the state. Sadly, this amendment has been twisted and changed in meaning over the years to fit political means. It has come to have less certainty of the sovereignty of the states, which is the intention of this amendment. The U.S. Supreme Court was divided and has been divided over this particular amendment. The first case that was brought before the U.S. Supreme Court was McCullough versus Maryland, where in the early 1800s, the courts rejected Maryland's argument that the federal government had attempted to take on powers that were not specifically authorized by the Constitution. The courts reinterpreted this amendment to state that it forbid only those activities that could not be seen as necessary and proper. In other words, they completely ignored the clear writings of the Constitution and stated that those things that were not necessary and proper for carrying out the enumerated powers of Congress were to the states, and the things that the federal government did need to carry out those enumerated powers suddenly belonged to the federal government, contrary to what Jefferson and others in that time had intended with this Constitution. This ruling significantly increased the power of the federal government and weakened the sovereignty of the individual states. Some people think today that that may not be a real big issue until they realize how much influence and how much intrusion the federal government has into their own state government. However, the Supreme Court was also not consistent in these rulings. In 1871, in Collector versus Day, they ruled that Congress could implement a national tax, but could not tax state officials. This was later overturned in 1941, when Franklin Roosevelt used the courts to his advantage to push through his New Deal programs, creating radical changes in our nation. More recently, the 10th Amendment was cited in the case of Prince versus the U.S. In this case, which declared that the firearms-related Bradley bill was unconstitutional, Justices O'Connor and Thomas wrote opinions separately, but both stating that the 10th Amendment prevented the federal government from ordering state officials to administrate a federal program. They understood that the Constitution, based on the 10th Amendment, strictly forbid this federal intrusion into states' rights. Another more recent case that is particularly important is the Kentucky clerk Kim Davis, who was jailed for refusing a Supreme Court order. According to Ed Stracker of the American Thinker, the Constitution does not provide for the government to legislate marriage. Therefore, the government has no authority to declare homosexual marriage a right for anyone in our nation. This amendment will continue to play a role in federal and state relationships, as federal challenges to the sovereignty of individual states in areas where there is no clear constitutional power become more and more the norm. This underscores why early patriots believed that the amendment was critical to the addition of the U.S. Constitution, and why we need to pay close attention to how our current government implements this particular protection of our rights. I thank you for listening.